The judge overseeing the Georgia election interference case against Donald Trump says that he plans to make a decision in the next 2 weeks on whether to remove Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis from the case over a romantic relationship with top prosecutor Nathan Wade. We brought you the closing arguments in that case here on Live Now from Fox yesterday. And after several days of testimony, a Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee heard arguments over whether Willis's relationship with Wade amounts to a conflict of interest that should force them off one of 4 criminal cases against Trump. Now, attorneys for Trump and some of his co-defendants accused Willis and Wade of lying on the witness stand about when their relation began, telling the judge that keeping the district attorney on the case threatens to undermine the public's confidence in this enormously consequential prosecution. Willis's office, meanwhile, said the lawyers have failed to provide evidence that the district attorney benefited financially from her relationship with Wade, which the pair said ended last summer. We do want to bring in Randy Zelin, a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney who joins us now live. Randy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I wanted to first start off with the closing arguments that happened yesterday. What was your take on the closing arguments from both sides? Who, if any, had a stronger argument?
In my mind, Fani Willis has already lost. Donald Trump has already won. If stupidity were the measure for the judge, then Fani Willis is guilty to Wuthering Heights. What to me is very interesting when I talk about Fani Willis has already lost, because the judge really has to determine whether the standard is an actual conflict of interest or is it the appearance of a conflict of interest. Even if there's not an actual conflict of interest, is the appearance, is the sense through the lens of anybody watching that this isn't cool, that this is inappropriate, that this is not the way that a prosecutor should be behaving, is that enough to remove her? The point is, I would imagine the judge is going to decide, no matter what, that her behavior was inappropriate, that her behavior was wrong, that her behavior compromised the integrity of our justice system. And it will simply be a matter of, have you crossed over the threshold to the extent that the judge decides, nope, it's got to be an actual conflict, as opposed to the appearance of an impropriety. So to me, she's already lost, and former President Trump has already won, regardless of the outcome.
And it's interesting because that really comes down to the crux of the argument, what you just mentioned, not just the fact that there was a conflict of interest, but the appearance of one, because and that was going to be my next question, because even if Willis stays on this case, I would imagine that would taint future proceedings and make it likely for any future decision to be questioned under that cloud.
There is no doubt. And what we're really talking about is getting to the trial. So let's assume for the moment that the court decides, you know something, this wasn't cool. I don't like the way that it looks, but there was no actual conflict of interest. It wasn't like she was sleeping with a prosecution witness. It's not as if you're in cahoots with someone who's playing double agent. That's an actual conflict of interest. I'm sleeping with a witness. So the point is, though, at the trial, I promise you, there will be at least one juror who will look every single time the district attorney's office does anything. We'll look at it through the lens of, you've got to be kidding me. You're accusing him of undermining the integrity of the election system when you've undermined the integrity of the justice system? How dare you?
So you mentioned the trial, because obviously this is likely going to go to trial. So let's say the judge does remove Willis from the case, and of course a new district attorney is going to have to be appointed. What is the time frame for all of that to unfold? Because I would imagine that would impact also with the November election cycle and all of the other cases that are ongoing as well.
The case will never be tried before the election. The case may not even be tried now if she's allowed to stay on, because remember, the time and the attention that has been taken away from trial prep, and instead everything has gone into defending this hearing. And don't forget, at least in my humble opinion, regardless of what the judge does, Georgia has an oversight committee. And it may very well be that that oversight committee, where it was really designed to remove left-wing district attorneys who don't prosecute crimes. The underpinnings of that reasoning, and I'll look at my notes. The underpinnings of that whole design is we want to prevent the moral decline of our communities as a result of crime that doesn't get prosecuted. Well, couldn't that same commission determine that what Fani Willis did, to the extent that there's even an appearance of an impropriety, an appearance of a conflict, would create that same sense of moral decline? So I don't know that she's out of the woods, but there is no question the Georgia case will never go to trial before the election.
And I'm also interested in your thoughts on the impact that this ruling might have on Trump's other court cases, because it was interesting that you noted, regardless of what the judge decides, Trump wins.
He's already won, to the extent that this court says anything that even remotely sounds like inappropriate conduct, unprofessional conduct, unethical conduct. That is going to infect the other trials, because it allows the former president to once again, microphone in hand, talked about, see what they're doing to me? They're going to do it to you. Look at what these prosecutors will do. Look at the lengths that they will go, the arrogance, the hubris, the stupidity. Look how badly they want me. So yes, that will transcend the Georgia case, and it will allow the former president to use that to show the country and these other cases that he is a victim of a witch hunt. The interesting thing, though, is you really can't necessarily say that about the Manhattan DA's case, which may be the only case that actually goes to trial before the election, because the district attorney Bragg there has really gone out of his way to keep his mouth shut, to not get into the political fray, to not jump in and say or do anything. That case has been very quiet, and suddenly it's about 3.5 weeks to a trial that the court has said it's going.
And I know that this is a little off topic. It's one of the four, but what are your thoughts on the classified documents case? And we heard from the judge yesterday in Fort Pierce, Florida, in federal court, where they have yet to set that trial date. Now it looks like possibly the summer. But again, that's still up in the air as well.
Former president is a winner yet again, because no matter what the court in Florida decides, it's going to be helpful to the former president. If the court should decide, you know something, we can get this trial in before the election. Now it looks like election interference. And if the court says, no, we've got a March 26th trial date in Manhattan. We've got so much work left to do, as the court already alluded to. We've got so much work to do to get this case ready for trial. And we all know about the DOJ policy that we don't want to do something too close to the election that could affect the election. So if the judge says, no, we're not going to trial before the election, former president's a winner, because regardless of the outcome, he will either pardon himself if he wins, he will have his vice president pardon him under the 25th Amendment, or he will have his new attorney general just knock the case out. But whatever it is, once again, the Florida case will show us that Donald Trump manages to squeeze lemonade out of cement.
I mean, that's a really interesting analogy. I want to take it one step further because, of course, we're talking about the Supreme Court and how they are set to hear whether.
You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
Let's not forget that the court in Florida can and will take the position and has taken the position. Hey, wait a second. We need SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, to decide whether or not the former president can invoke presidential immunity. So the earliest any of us expect that decision will be in the end of June. So how in God's name, if that decision first comes down in the end of June, can the case go to trial a week or two later? So again, I think the stage has been set. The documents case is not going to trial before the election.
And again, even though these are separate cases, they're all interconnected. And what happens in one absolutely impacts what happens in the other and the timing of all of this. Randy, there are quite a number of cases involving the former president, Donald Trump. You know, any last thoughts on the misconduct case? I know we started with Fani Willis, but then, of course, it evolves into all of these other cases. Any other last thoughts that you would like to share with our Live Now from Fox viewers?
I think everyone should pay closer attention to the hush money case in New York. I think we all were lulled into a false sense of security that that case was never going to trial, that case was the one that kind of was the test to see if the whole world would fall off of its axis if a former president was indicted. But I don't think any one of us expected that case to go to trial in the face of the January 6th indictment, in the face of the classified documents case, and maybe even in the face of the Georgia case. Now, all of a sudden, it's kind of like when you're not paying attention and suddenly it just creeps up out of nowhere. And now that will be the first case to go to trial. And that could be the one that no one expected. And the outcome there could very well have an impact on the election that we all thought these other cases would.
It's also very interesting, of course. We are going to be watching each one of these cases very carefully here on Live Now from Fox. And as I'm sure you know, whenever there's a camera, and if there is a camera inside, we, of course, are going to bring that live coverage to our viewers. Randy Zelin, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, what a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for taking the time on this Saturday.
Thank you for having me.